Severance Season 2 Episode 6 has cheating spouses, reintegration munchies, awkward dinner parties, and workplace confessionals.
Helly, we shared vessels.
Hi, I'm Jared B, back with another Severance breakdown because my Audi JBuck is he's too lazy to do these breakdowns himself. Anyway, thank you so much for clicking this. We hit last week's quota, and I'm one step closer to those fluffy, delicious, syrupy waffles. So let's get into Severance Episode 6. Things pick up literally minutes after the end of Episode 5, with Mark reeling from the weirdness of Lumen's bright hallways and seeing his assumed dead wife listing off random facts after allegedly losing her 2 years prior. He can't make sense of any of this as Ragabi chimes in that they're making progress, actual communication, rather than waking up on a table, referencing his initial reintegration trip at the end of Episode 3. We as viewers have a little bit more information than these two, as Ragabi says.
All I know is she's essential.
I took this as Gemma's essential to Mark's completion of the mysterious Cold Harbor file. She is what is driving him, with a leading theory revolving around love. This undying love that is somehow needed for Kier and Lumen's goals. Surprisingly, the aspect of love has cleverly weaved itself into various moments, from the conversation between Helly and Dylan in Season 1, Episode 6.
Well, maybe love transcends severance.
You think so?
To the fourth appendix entry in Episode 4 talking about Kier's love for Dieter. Helly's 100% completion screen in Season 1, Episode 4.
I love you.
To the briefly seen appendix entry in the same episode stating, a man of the temperament of Mr. Edgar Willett has scarce ability to access his workforce's most powerful asset, their love. Later saying, romantic love may burn with a more luminous flame but is gone more quickly than corporate affection, which persists even through generations. Take a step back, because this is happening today in our world, this generational admiration for corporations and brands that are seemingly trying to become more and more human, with influencers or fun little Twitter interactions to blind everyone from the fact that they have a shady past and, like any company, are profit-driven. This was a long walk, but I'm pretty sure Mark's love for Gemma is Lumen's missing piece. Mark alludes to the 5 stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, mentioning bargaining, the 3rd stage, seeing all of this as a way to get Gemma back. Unfortunately, I think that he is definitely putting the cart way ahead of the horse because of what happens at the end of this episode. He's irrationally bargaining with his own life. Unfortunately, I think Ragabi isn't entirely being truthful with him either when it comes to his reintegration and Lumen in general. Like, her silence after Mark's hopes speaks volumes.
But for me, it might actually happen.
As we quickly jump over to Lumen, getting another amazing mirror shot of the group touching on duality once again. As Dylan is on their team, he wants to look and help them look for the dark elevator while also preserving his own wants, aka the Audi visitation room. Any Mark's reintegration is kicking in more as the are getting clearer and clearer. Seriously, an awesome way of ramping up the dread of reintegration. Now, one thing I will point out in this reintegration scene is the blue beta fish is on the opposite side of what we've seen previously. The creators have mentioned that everything is purposeful, and I'm not entirely sure what this means right now, but a few breakdowns ago I mentioned that Dylan's living room seemed to be different, almost like flipped from Season 1 to Season 2. So there's no big theories on this right now, just like, let's all keep this in mind and put a pin in it. I gotta give a hand to the creators and writers because this episode introduces a whole new angle on the morality of Severance that this series has yet to explore. So thought-provoking. From an Audi's perspective of an innie's own autonomy, sexual exploits, marriage, and infidelity, despite that innie being your husband, to religious aspects and beliefs. Without blowing this story out to see the entire world, these aspects are brought into our core cast, and it is so interesting. For example, would you like your innie porking your wife or husband despite it really kind of actually being you? You never know, he might have some new tricks like
think of popping each other's assholes.
As we get another Audi visitation session with Dylan and Gretchen, seeing the 18 monitors with 18 being symbolic of bondage in the Bible. I'm gonna need everyone's help right now because this picture of Gretchen with the cupcake and little candle, it has to be referencing something, but I'm coming up blank.
He dumb?
Back in episode 3, Gretchen's outfit referenced that of Pam's outfit in The Office season 3, episode 17, encompassing similar themes from that episode. Whereas here, her hair kinda does also look like Pam's, but, she's able to, quote, let her hair down around this new innie Dylan, as it's prime time for crime time and the two get down and dirty. This is the motivated, loving Dylan Gretchen wants. Maybe this is how Dylan was when they first met in their relationship, as it is a stark reality switch seeing how she communicates with outie Dylan in this episode. You can see that she's obviously wrestling with the morality of what she did while hiding it from his outie. Her purple shirt symbolizes that she's caught between, the red outie and the blue innie, with half of the frame bathed in black, showing that she's only being half truthful. So is it cheating? Do you tell your partner? Is it going to be, the downfall of outie Dylan? I believe you gotta take the good with the bad, and Gretchen just does not feel that way. On the shelf in the background, a Dispatcher of the Month award is there for Gretchen. Now, back in episode 3, I theorized Gretchen was potentially a police officer, but this makes me want to change my mind to her being an EMT dispatcher, as the award has the Star of Life symbol on it. This fuels even more into my theory back in our episode 3 breakdown of thinking Gretchen is in some way connected to Gemma's car accident. It would be wild to find out that she was there that night because, back in episode 5, we do learn that much of Keir is on Lumen's payroll, and they are just swapping out bodies with random ones at the morgue, or at least that's what Ragabi says. Milchick, on the other hand, is slowly losing his grip on reality. His sacrifices for Lumen feel like they are overlooked as he disassociates, staring off into the abyss. However, I don't think that this is him. The board is using his body at this moment. Now, it's a theory, but a majority of viewers agree that Keir and the previous CEOs, aka the board, somehow have access to at least Natalie and her headset. But I noticed specific Lumen employees wear this little raindrop pin, and I believe whatever procedure or religious ceremony they've gone through now lets Keir, quote, live in them, literally using their bodies as a viewing vessel. This ties back to the whole Grashupan gray coat story as well, hiding amongst the common folk or the common workers of Lumen. This is why Milchick has kind of been a smidge different than his persona in season 1. As Miss Wong comes into the office, I think any theory of her being a robot is smashed. Milchick brings up her fellowship and Wintertide material, something mentioned on the official Lumen Industries LinkedIn page. I chalk it all up as a Lumen-esque internship leading to Wintertide, which is probably some sort of college or higher education institution that readies potential department managers for Lumen. So the mystery of Miss Wong can probably be put to bed for now, as it is interesting though that these two kind of have like a Sith, master and apprentice relationship, heavily leaning on Lumen's core principle of wiles. Milchick is tasked with a workplace religious-esque penance almost, paperclipping hundreds of general announcement documents because of his failure to paperclip properly. One viewer last week suggested that this paperclip fiasco could actually be something that ties into future events, sliding in cryptic messages through the code detectors, or maybe even a way to get messages to management. I love this idea as Milchick's hands shake because of the trauma he's going through. He opens his review and we get a quick glimpse at his very low score for his delegative leadership approach. This is a more laissez-faire approach, like hands off, let them do whatever. The innies have more responsibility in their own leadership, which ultimately failed and caused him to, tighten the leash last episode. Praises where praises are due, because this is a masterclass in acting, as he has to change his vocabulary to fit that of what Lumen wants. This could be because innies respond better to specific language mentioned by Natalie in episode 3, initially repeating the same line he spoke to Miss Wong earlier.
And eradicating from your essence childish folly, you must eradicate from your essence childish folly.
Milchick is hurting. This guy needs a break. He is having to give Lumen every single piece of him that makes him unique. This guttural,
Grow. 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 Grow.
is next level, showing how primal Lumen is stripping Milchick down too. Honestly, if the whole bored viewing theory is correct, this could be them controlling him to do this, and maybe grow has a much different interpretation. Like, let the virus of Lumen grow inside of you and spread and grow into others. Just my 2 cents, it could be way off. Either way, Milchick needs to have a face turn to help our MDR pals and give Tramell Tillman all of the Emmys, because holy nuts, he is acting his dick off this season. Heading over to Mark and Helly, things are awkward. As Mark reveals,
Helly, we shared vessels.
Mark fills in Helly with what went downtown Pound Town in episode 4, and rightfully so. Both were violated and used by Helena and Lumen. Bringing in the morality of it all, are innies just objects that can be manipulated, or are they living, breathing people with rights? Both Mark and Helly were assaulted to different degrees. I think it speaks volumes of Mark's character to feel just as bad as Helly feels, slipping off her shoes, just like it's a one-night stand walk of shame as she stews on everything. Like I mentioned earlier, the ethics of the world are put right there front and center in this episode, and personally, I side with Mark and Helly. Both were tricked, used, abused. The whole thing is really f***ed up. What I love about this is the two of them taking their power back. Sure, for 8 hours a day, they are under the rule of Lumen, but that doesn't mean that they have to be slaves to them, as Helly wants her own memories of Mark's sweet, sweet, sensual body.
Hey, yo!
Ironically, this takes the sexcapades of episode 4 and filters them through a first love, much more cute and endearing light, both being in a tent, whereas this version is a cute little cozy fort and feels like actual love rather than the lust we saw in episode 4. Little cute laughs, smoochies, it's awkward, and there's nothing hotter than consent.
Yes.
So hot right now.
Swooping in here with a potential theory, so earlier I mentioned love, and Mark's love for Gemma is theoretically keeping him going on this Cold Harbor file. What if Mark and Helly now win item on the severed floor, this love shifts to Helly while Mark is at doing his work and completely mucks up Lumen and Kier's plans? It would be the ultimate irony, as the daughter of this company who is going to, quote, save the world, change the world, is actually the one to screw everything up and watch the entire company and empire crumble. Helly is the true vision of what Helena wants, so it just feels right. Again, it's just an idea, but how sick and perfectly structured that would be. Mark gets a nosebleed and heads to Miss Wong for assistance, and it is interesting that she asks Mark if he's seen any auras or having hallucinations, as he quickly says no. I'm curious if Lumen actually knows reintegration is possible, but are sweeping it under the rug. It feels like an odd question to ask, and would tie in with Cobell's attempts and claims that reintegration was possible, while the board dismissed all of her claims and have kind of distanced themselves from her. Now here's where most of you viewers are probably like, what the heck, baffled, hella confused, as Mark shifts from this scene with Miss Wong and Helly back into his basement with Ragabi. What we just witnessed at Lumen were all any memories that Outie Mark is slowly remembering. Yes, all of these events happened, but Ragabi mentioned that they were kind of recent memories. So theoretically, everything we're seeing on the inside of Lumen may not 100% line up with events on the outside. For the most part right now, I think that it's pretty clear and apparent that everything has been chronologically, but do not be surprised if in the future the creators, everyone, the writers, everyone just gets all crazy wackadoo with it, and we see some scenes that are out of order and they adopt a more non-linear storytelling fashion, kind of like Pulp Fiction or Memento. Ragabi with whatever motivation she has, because really, why does she want to help Mark's reintegration? This is something we should be aware of, as she wants to speed up the process, cutting a hole in Mark's head and, quote, float the chip. Mark ain't having it because there's obviously a risk of hemorrhage, as he bounces out with a severe case of munchies.
Pizzas, we need 2 big pizzas, man.
The entire Chinese restaurant scene is a whirlwind of emotions in just like 6 minutes. Mark looking like absolute shit, Helena casually strolling in. I am convinced that the severance chips have like some sort of tracking element to them. The two having fun banter, learning Helena might actually have been a virgin like some viewers theorized, Mark sensing things aren't right, Helena with him saying that his wife's name was Hannah, knowing damn well that it's Gemma, as Mark probably has slight memories that this Egan, this head of Lumen, is abusing him in more than one way, as once again, a key member of Lumen is trying to extract whatever was said or done during the OTC event at the end of Season 1. I'll give it to them, they are persistent. Maybe they don't want just the idea of the OTC out in the wild, like the fact that it can be done, or Helena is thirsty. A lot of subtle elements show up, like the four tempers are hit on just in this brief conversation. Turns of joy, sadness, fear, uncertainty. Mark is given 2 fortune cookies with his check, despite him eating alone, symbolizing his innie and outie still apart from one another, while alluding to Helena and Helly, 2 parts of the same person. The red carpet associated with their outies, clashing with the otherwise blue table booths. The overhead lights are reminiscent of the ones on the severed floor, while their reflection is distorted, meaning Mark isn't fully aware of his innie just yet. This restaurant is actually Aang's Chinese restaurant in Kingston, New York, where much of Severance is shot. It's cool that they were able to utilize this real location, switching the name from Aang's to Zufu, with Zufu meaning grandfather in Chinese, aka Kier Egan, aka
the grandfather would cherish what you've done.
The sign only lighting the FU is a perfect in-your-face clue to how Mark feels after what just happened, as we can actually see Helena's driver from episode 3 casually chilling in the driver's seat of her car sitting out front, paying attention to absolutely nothing. Mark rushes home, giving Ragabi the best apology.
Sorry for being a dick. Let's do it.
As they get to work on floating the chip. Body horror levels of intensity in this scene. As someone smarter than me can definitely please let me know what kind of liquid Ragabi uses here to essentially surround Mark's severance chip. I'm assuming doing this cuts off some sort of frequency from whatever Lumen's transmitter is. Mark's innie's memories flood back to him, and of course they hit a snag, seeing himself being intimate with who he believes is Helena Egan from, the restaurant only minutes earlier, jerking his head, causing these brain juices to just swirl about. Mark is not doing good at this point, with Devin showing up wanting to help with the whole innie-outie situation. However, this mood change, sweating, disorientation, loss of motor skills, and smelling something strange all lead to Mark having a seizure and collapsing to the ground. All cards are on the table as Ragabi comes up, Devin is confused as heck, and Mark theoretically passes out. He is in a bad spot. During his final flashes, there are quick glimpses of Gemma sporting longer hair, so I'm convinced next week is going to be a full-on flashback introspective memory episode of Mark and Gemma prior to the car accident. It would be interesting that we find out Mark was the one driving and he crashed because of his drinking. So we'll see how all of that pans out, but the teases are there. Lastly, we have Irving's dinner date with Bert and Fields, and I think this whole thing is a distraction. Drummond, who has clearly robbed every janitor in Kier, casually enters Irving's place knowing he's not going to be there. I'm convinced this is not an isolated incident, as we saw Cobell do the same thing in Season 1, and the fake newspaper at the beginning of this Season 2 mentions the Bard Creek Bandit, probably as a cover-up for Lumen's muscle and management entering severed employees' homes while they are at work. Drummond picks the lock to Irving's chest, discovering all of the notes, maps, and research Irving's outie has been conducting. Initially, this break-in was probably to find any information tied to the OTC at the end of Season 1 because, I don't know, that's a huge thing everyone's trying to figure out. But Drummond has hit the mother lode. However, I think Outie Irving is going to know this is a sign that Lumen is creeping on him, because Drummond opens the chest and all of the documents are just there they're right there in the open. However, we know Outie Irving had them hidden in a false bottom of the chest. So yes, Drummond found all of these documents, but Irving opening the chest will see this, signaling him that someone has definitely been in his apartment going through his stuff, despite it originally being him. Yes, I know it's a stretch, but
Hey, it could happen.
I'll admit I spent way too much time looking at these documents and the same ones in Season 1. Why do specific names have certain letters circled and underlined, while the computational mathematics and masters in philosophy set off my spidey sense? Here are kind of the names and the letters that were underlined, so please, someone that is smarter than me, please let me know in the comments if you can figure this out, if there's any sort of correlation with these underlined letters and names. Irving's dinner date adds a lot to our character and what Lumen may all be about, as Bert's place gives off a colder, more ominous feel than the warm, inviting home that we saw at the end of Season 1. Just from subtle clues, we can tell that there is a social class difference between the two. Irving lives modestly in Lumen apartments and embarrassingly scratches off the price tag of his wine, clashing with Bert and Field's luxurious home and kitchen, and this Robert Springfield's 1949 painting Ignilo clown going for a cool 11 Gs. Fields refers to Bert as Attila, also the title of this episode, which is a reference to Attila the Hun, a 5th century ruler, conqueror, tactician, who was one of the most feared enemies of the Western and Eastern Roman Empire. So instantly, Bert is someone to be feared rather than this lovable guy we saw on the severed floor in Season 1. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing. Ironically, Ignilo from the Ignilo clown painting is Italian for lamb, while some scholars have mentioned that the Illa in Attila means little wolf. Before we even get into the dinner, you can tell Irving has already stepped over the line. None of this is appropriate, something we saw Milchuk do last week with Mark. As I mentioned up top, this episode tackles the morality of severance, with this dinner date tackling religion and how severed innies are seen as individuals with souls. It's such an odd way to look at innies, especially since we later find out the rich, or rather Bert in this case, used it as his own personal playground to have a second chance of getting into heaven with Fields, while Irving theoretically has to do this for money and survival. Another way the rich and Lumen exploit things in this world, just like the pregnant congressman's wife in Season 1. The whole thing is gross, while there are some clever hints at bigger things tucked in their conversations. Bert and Fields mentioned that the pastor of their church basically was spitting pro-Lumen propaganda right after the pair had talked about it over breakfast. This feels like a Lumen is listening situation, luring people in need, whether it be financially or spiritually, to the doorstep of Lumen. It's all control and manipulation. A very similar situation happened with Peggy in the Lexington letter, almost like someone was listening to her struggles and sent the, little savior of Lumen her way. I love how the creators can change our perspective on a character in less than 10 minutes. Bert ain't the good guy we know. Heck, with this devious smile, he might as well be the devil in Irving's eyes. However, I think the agenda of this dinner was twofold. One with the questioning of Irv and Bert's innie relationship, with the second half being potentially getting Irving comfortable and drunk to divulge on his OTC secrets and potentially more. I say this because Drummond knows he's in the clear to do some creeping at Irving's, while it's revealed Bert has had connections to Lumen for roughly 20 years. A whole new can of worms, because we know Bert worked in O&D for roughly 7 years, and Irving claims that the first severed office allegedly opened 12 years ago, despite Fields slipping up saying that Bert had a Lumen partner 20 years ago. Lumen was behind 9/11. To me, this means Bert is way higher up in Lumen than just a severed employee, a severed worker. Heck, this probably explains why his name and a few select others were purposely put on Irving's map. More of a stay away designation than a, ooh, my innie lover lives over there, let's go visit him. I'm hoping Irving is in fact connected to some other sort of corporation or a government agent undercover, because his corporate espionage story is ramping up, ladies and gents, as things come to a close with Ella Fitzgerald's cover of Sunshine of Your Love, with its lyrics comparing the beauty of a sunrise to the glow you receive from a special relationship. It's such an ironic, dark metaphor for how we as viewers went into this Bert and Irving dinner with optimism and hope and just let's get them together, only to realize that Irving is now in a heck of a lot of trouble. And that is another breakdown in the books. I'd like to thank everyone so much for watching these videos, and Audi JBuck being the slacker, getting all the credit. You You viewers know who is doing the hard work here on the Severed Floor. Anyway, feel free to drop all of your thoughts, feelings, theories, and out there ideas on Severance Season 2, Episode 6, and I'll be sure to see everyone next week for our Episode 7 breakdown, with what I'm saying is going to be a flashback, Gemma, and Mark-centric episode. Okay, bye-bye, everyone!